audible online, I hope. So just as we go to the next panel, firstly, welcome back to everyone. Welcome back to all those online as well. I have a piece of paper that I'm going to pass around, and I'm trying to collect titles that people are using as textbooks. So if you could just indicate your institution and what textbooks you're using, practical and, yeah, mostly practical, but also if there are media studies. Just an exercise to see what there is out there. Thanks. And then I'll turn you over to Dinesh, who'll chair the next panel. Thanks.
I'm just trying to see if it's the afternoon. Good mid-morning, everyone. The people at the back, can you join us? There's one person, Nancy. Have we lost a couple of people? Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, I realize that now, sorry.
No, they're coming back.
We'll just give it a second. How I love seeing myself so large on a screen. It's really awful. All right, thank you, Franz. I think we'll kick off with the next panel, which is entitled Teaching by Publishing. And I think by publishing, we mean broadcasting, tweeting, etc., etc. Tensions and opportunities of student media. My name is Dinesh, for those online. I'm the acting director of the Wits Center for Journalism at Wits University. And we're one of many schools to provide student programs or student-oriented programs. What do I want to say there? A practical professional program as opposed to a pure intellectual or theoretical program. I'm joined this afternoon or mid-morning by Mr. Rod Amner, sorry, my sinuses are acting up, so the Amner is now coming out, right? From Rhodes University, all the way in Grahamstown. Mr. Basil Hamusokwe from the University of Zambia. Basil, I'm sorry I interrupted your tea. And Ms. Pheladi Sethusa, who's a local from the Wits Center for Journalism. We're going to talk a little bit, I think, by starting off a little bit about what you're currently doing in each of your spaces, and then reflect on the topic itself if you want to carry on, or I'll ask some additional questions. Basil, can we start with you?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Basil Hamusokwe from the University of Zambia. This university is in Lusaka, and I'm a lecturer in media studies at the university. What am I doing currently? I'm just teaching now. So I'm the immediate past head of the department. I just handed over the headship last month after serving for 4 years, two terms which were running for 2 years. So I feel more relieved now that yeah. But so basically, what we do at the university is that we teach media studies, we teach journalism. We have a program that is called Media and Journalism Studies Program, which we have just transformed or transitioned from the Bachelor of Mass Communication program. So through that program, we do have a number of teaching facilities that we use. Maybe I can also start with just a brief reflection of myself in relation to what we do at the Department of Media and Communication Studies. So I was undergrad in 2001. I was in first year. And in 2002, the university introduced a campus radio station called Unza Radio. And that's the time that the department incorporated teaching using a radio station. But before that, we also had the Lusaka Star newspaper. It used to be a monthly publication. So this was a print copy, and we used to publish it every month. Before I became very active with the radio station, we had a course called Basic News Writing in second year. And through that course, we're also expected to submit stories to the newspaper. And the process was such that we would write stories and submit to the lecturers, who would then assess the stories and pick some of the stories and put them in the newspaper, and those would qualify. And while I happened to be one of the few that managed to get a byline in the Lusaka Star in class, and that was a very joyous moment. And from that time on, seeing my byline in a newspaper, that made me believe that journalism is real. You know, it was a big experience for me as a student at second year, who was competing for bylines with third and fourth year students. And to me, that was the moment that I began to appreciate the model of using these platforms to teach. So for now, maybe I can end there and allow others to also maybe introduce themselves.
Thanks, Basil. Rod?
Hi, thanks. Yeah, so in Makanda, as it's now known rather than Grahamstown, there's a 152-year-old newspaper which the School of Journalism and Media Studies bought in about 2004, and it operated as a sort of a separate entity, a business entity in town, and we ran students through there, so some lectures would go into that newsroom, but it operated as a separate institution and business. The business has wound down. So essentially what has happened is we've incorporated Grocod's Mail into the School of Journalism and Media Studies. We have a lab and we have some students, and there's me and a colleague, Linda Mkaza, who are the lecturers responsible for bringing this thing out every week, along with our students. So we have 8 postgraduate diploma students who've come to us quite green from other universities, haven't done journalism before, are doing this as an experiential learning program. They're also working on Rhodes Music Radio. So they're doing news bulletins every week based on the work that they're doing for Grocod's Mail. So it's branded as Grocod's on Rhodes Music Radio. We're doing current affairs shows, and we're planning sort of deliberative programming there as well. Yeah, so it doesn't, there's no newspaper, there's no, unfortunately, unlike Vuvuzela, there's no physical newspaper, but it does, I mean, it's quite a big operation in some ways. There are about 40 stories being produced every week. Every week there's a PDF newspaper, around 30 pages or so, which is sent to WhatsApp groups, about 5,000 to 6,000 people on WhatsApp groups locally, to a couple of thousand people on MailChimp. It obviously goes out on social media as well. We have about 16,000 followers on Facebook, and we post it to even bigger groups in the city. And so in other words, it's kind of the only news organization in town, and it's kind of us, a small group of part-time students and 2 faculty members. So that's essentially who we are and what we do. I don't know how much I should say now, but if I could just say a few things about what we try to do. Obviously, we're trying to simulate a real world environment, which isn't difficult. It's a very real place, Makanda, with a lot of very real challenges, a lot of social inequality, a lot of serious and deep-seated problems. So the real world is perhaps sometimes too real. That's one of the tensions we face. Some of our journalists have actually been threatened by senior political figures in the town with jail. There has been a political assassination locally just recently. We went to a funeral in a nearby town the other day, and an archbishop stood up and said he knew who had killed this person. And he's now meeting us tomorrow morning in a coffee shop to talk to us about this with my students. So it's fairly high stakes. And, pedagogically, I think there's quite a tension, quite a problematic space to be in. Students often need, the space to fail and the space to feel safe. And those are some of the issues that perhaps we can explore later. But yeah, I mean, I think what we're trying to do at the moment, for example, we're doing mapping work. So we're really trying to map our community by getting students to do what was called civic mapping back in the sort of public journalism days, to look at the different layers of civic life, the different social actors operating in these different layers of civic life, really understanding the social structure of our town, but also the communicative structure. So we've got this concept of communicative ecology from social informatics that we're trying to work with, which looks at the technology layer, the social networks in the town, and the discourse layers and the relationship between those layers. So we're really trying to reach people on the ground. So some of our students are working with the Public Service Accountability Monitor, which is part of our school, on an Action for Accountability project for the next 6 years, hopefully. And the idea is to go to hyper-local areas of the town and to build WhatsApp groups there, but to build civic action groups in these different hyper-local spaces. So you have very, very active citizens in certain parts of the city, hundreds of people on WhatsApp groups and street level, at sort of sub-suburban levels, and then wards. There are 14 wards in Makanda, and that's skewed, and it's skewed in terms of race and class in our community. There are very small WhatsApp groups in some township areas, and they're often very specific to, you know, church groups and those kinds of bonded social groups, but there aren't these kind of general groups, partly because the political culture doesn't allow for that. So certain councillors need to get permission from higher ups to allow citizens to actually say what they want to say in a certain hyperlocal space, which I think is very interesting. So I think the intersection actually between political culture and social networks is a very interesting thing to explore. Yeah, so yeah, just to say, you know, the students have been doing this all year. They certainly develop doing through this apprenticeship internship type of model, a kind of a deep immersion, a sense of belonging to this community now, a sense of ownership over the project, and I think a sense of pride. They put in a lot of hours, and I think, you know, the dopamine hits from getting the feedback, getting the comments, getting the likes and the loves from audiences. They're also immersed in sort of social partnerships. So the education reporter will be in a Makanda Circle of Unity education cluster for the year, and will build social relationships at the sort of official and quasi-official layers. But as I said, what we're trying to do now is go further down in those civic layers and actually talk to people who are connectors and catalysts, who maybe aren't in those more formal sort of civic or official leadership tiers and layers of the community. And I was going to say, just reflecting on what was being said earlier, that I think in a sense that's the sort of groundedness, sort of grounded theory of how we can build an African journalism, because I think it's in those sort of super hyper local contexts that you begin to understand what the communicative ecology of a community is. So at the moment, as I say, certain communities don't have, well, a lot, actually Facebook is our big thing, because you get Facebook Lite or Facebook Free. So everyone's on Facebook, and Facebook Messenger is this untapped resource that journalists haven't really thought about in terms of it being free and being a place where you can have 500 people in the same space. So the idea of collaborating with audiences, with citizens on stories, co-building stories as you go before you even publish, getting feedback on those stories later, all of that kind of thing. But then also understanding that, like the Archbishop who's now going to tell us who killed Jeff Budaza, he said that at a funeral. People communicate in very different ways in different communities. And it's really sort of understanding the fine-grained nuances of how those different communities communicate, being in those third places or incidental spaces or in those social spaces. And I think it's through that kind of work that our best stories have emerged. When students spend the day at a funeral or in just walking around the streets in a hyperlocal area, they begin to understand that community better, they build trust, and they get a whole bunch of sources and a whole bunch of story ideas. So I think maybe I should just leave it there for now, but yeah.
Thanks, Rod. Pheladi.
All right. So before I even start, as you can see, I have put some vuvuzelas on everyone's table as a bit of self-promotion for us. This was our once-off publication for the Wits centenary celebrations. So yeah, it was the first time the vuvuzela got printed in 3 years. We no longer have a print publication. We moved online, and that unfortunately was due to circulation numbers being down. So something we've seen in mainstream industry, in community papers, we also felt that. And yeah, we're an online only publication now. Much like the Rhodes program, it's a year-long honors in journalism taught through professional practice. So we run a student newsroom, and our students produce weekly content for that. And by content, I mean written articles, podcast episodes, videos, graphics. So we do try and do a lot. I think the analogy that Prof. Kruger brought up of the Swiss Army knife is very much what we try to do in our department. We try and build sort of multi-talented, multi-skilled journalists who can do a lot and are capable of a lot, just because we don't know where our graduates are going to end up. They start out the course thinking they're going to do one thing and change their minds by June, just because of the realities that they've met with in the newsroom. And to be able to pivot based on the skills that you now have and never would have thought to embark on learning is a great skill of this particular program. And I say this with confidence because I'm a graduate of the program. So I'm someone who has been produced by it and has used those various skills in industry for several years. And now coming back is a very unique opportunity to start rethinking how we teach, particularly because what industry needs isn't necessarily what we were producing. I mean, the whole point of this program used to be to create industry-ready journalists, newsroom-ready journalists rather. And newsrooms just can't take up people at the same levels that they once could. And our graduates have to go into other industries, and being able to help them figure out how to leverage those skills in different ways is something we have to think about consciously, because the socioeconomic situation, necessitates it. People are here to try and build a life, change their lives and their families' lives. So making sure that they are employable is something we can't ignore, and starting to think about perhaps entrepreneurship is something we need to consider a bit more deeply. The scholarship is important, obviously, but we also need, because we lead with our practice, just to make it a bit more tangible, if that makes sense. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. I will open it up to questions in a second, but perhaps I could start off by asking the three of you, given the amount of work that we do, and we do a lot with these students, and we've also heard people talk about the fact that newsrooms themselves expect our students as graduates to hit the ground running, because quite frankly, in the last 20 years or so, newsrooms have given up on training. They don't have the capacity, they don't have the time, and they want people who can just, hit the ground running. What impact does that have on you as a teacher in an academic space, not just in terms of your hours, but the emotional toll that it takes on you?
Sure. That is a tough question, especially because I don't know if it was the pandemic or just how students are, but people had a lot going on in the last 2 years, and you have to shoulder a lot of that personal problems that they come to you with, the struggles they're having. So you can't just tell people to press on despite ABC that's happening at home, or despite not being able to actually shoulder this level of work. It's very rigorous, and we say it every year to the people coming in, but no one actually realizes until they're in the throes of it and can't cope. So it's tough. I've taken a few courses on dealing with students at risk. So, I have that. I have colleagues at CCUD who help out. It is a lot of work and a lot of sort of unseen labor. But I think it's worth it, and we shouldn't divorce ourselves from having that sort of intimate connection because it's more work. I think it ultimately makes better people and better journalists if they know that in the newsroom I come from, my mental health was important to my editor, and that's a standard they have now going for themselves, and in whichever workplace they enter, they can carry that care through.
Thanks, Pheladi. Rod?
Yeah, I actually forgot to get on my plane yesterday because I misread things, doing things at speed. So yeah, I think it is really onerous. I mean, on the one hand, it is really onerous, and it's a 24/7 thing. Your colleagues go on VAC, or at least go out the building for a while, and you have to be there 50 or 49 weeks of 52 every year, and the students go away, and then it's just you have to do the journalism, and there's just one of you or two of you, and that's it for the entire town. That's the line between you and the information ecology of your town, to some extent. Well, not exactly, because as has been pointed out, there are all those peripheral actors. There's a lot of information being produced, and it's about how to curate that and how to put systems in place to bring that into play. I think for students as well, I mean, some of them were saying, geez, we were just hoping to get a kind of degree and then have the soft life. And they actually use that term, the soft life. Apparently they're going to leave and get cars and jobs and mortgages and very cool stuff, and it's all going to be fine. I hope that works out for them. But certainly this is not the soft life. They are the hardest working students, I think, in the building. We have about 450 students from first year through to master's level. And I'm pretty sure that they put in more hours than anyone else. But I think it's also true to say that they want to be there, and that they do feel those feedback loops very powerfully, and they have a sense of responsibility to it, which I think is a good thing. But I do think it has to be managed. I do think that it can feel onerous. So a research career alongside this, a heavy teaching burden. There are other students coming from fourth year and third year, and photojournalism, whatever, through our ranks. There's a lot of teaching involved. It is a lot. It's actually too much, to be honest. And I think that what gradually is going to start happening in the school is that we are going to put our platforms, that's Growcots and Rhodes Music Radio, more at the center of what we do, and that more capacity will then be unlocked to come in and actually hold these platforms as experiential learning platforms. I'm hoping that will be the case, because I do think it is frankly unsustainable. What I would say as a positive, though, is that what you get here is a perfect harmony of your teaching, your research, and your community engagement work. It's kind of all happening in one. And those things create, I think, potentially a very powerful mix for an academic who maybe has their head screwed on. At the moment, mine isn't, but I'm hoping I'll get there.
No, I hear you, but the question is how to put that to staffing and promotions and convince them. Basil?
Yeah, I think, as Roy has said, it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work which requires the involvement of everyone, both students and staff as well. I think for the University of Zambia, we have created a system on both sides. The students manage themselves. So we have some sort of editorial structures for both the newspaper and the radio station. So, we have a constitution which actually establishes the radio station, and it establishes positions of news director, programs director, and that sort of things. So they have specific roles which they do undertake as students. And that also goes for the Osaka. They've got very specific roles. But then what we have also done is that we have aligned that practical work with some sort of course assessments. So the work they do at the radio station, the work they do at the newspaper is aligned with the continuous assessment. So there's a lot of collaboration between the manager of the radio station, the coordinator for broadcast, the coordinator for the Osaka Star, with the specific courses that these students are also taking. So what happens is that maybe, for example, in second year, they'll have a radio production, course where they'll be required to do certain productions, and those productions would also have to feed into the radio station, the programming of the radio station. So the lecturer for that course is mindful that they have to work with the radio station manager and other people in between to make sure that they provide content for the radio station, and the same applies for the newspaper. So there will be courses like feature writing, editing this and that, which will also then feed into the production of the newspaper. There will be courses like editorial writing and the like, which feed into the content of the radio station, I mean, the newspaper. And even the stages, like the sequencing, is also very aligned. At first year, most of the time, mostly what they do is some sort of theoretical work. But there's always students that, they come in first year, they are already interested in being on radio or producing, and they're also interested in writing stories, but we do not assess them. We start assessing them at second year because the assessments are aligned to specific courses. So at second year, for example, we have courses like, basic news writing. And their requirement at that stage is to be reporters. At the third year, we have courses like editing, and their requirement is to be editors at the radio station and at the newspaper. At fourth year, they are doing media management, and so they become directors of this and that, and so this is so aligned, and they themselves know, according to the establishment, that they can only rise to the position of editor this when they reach this stage, when they can be director this and manager this when they reach this stage. So of course it's very exhausting because it always comes out as that extra work. For students, they've got specific coursework. So that is what is supposed to be their work, but then they have to, again, go to the radio station. They have to go into the newsroom for the newspaper. So it comes out as extra work. For lecturers, you need to teach during your class hours, during your time. But again, there's that extra work that you need to dedicate to being with these students in the newsroom. So you need to be with them. I remember when I started teaching in the department, I was made a coordinator for the newspaper. And we used to have meetings in the evenings. I remember having a lot of meetings in the evenings, around 20 hours, especially a few days before deadline. We had to almost camp there, and sometimes if you really want to be productive, you also need to find different ways of making these students work, not just for the marks, but work for the station and work for the newspaper, and also work for you, respond to you. Sometimes you had during evening sessions, I remember having to drive out, to buy snacks and drinks and, bring back to the students so that we could continue working, because, it was, we had to beat the deadline. So it can actually be a lot of work sometimes.
Thanks, Basil. I think we all identify with your chicken and chips moments because we've all done those. I'll open it up to questions. Are there any questions from the floor? There's?
Now that we're in this digital, all media type of world, how important are writing courses? Do you think that they're still vital, or do the students come in already able to write and you just have to sort of direct them?
I think writing's still very, very important. And because in our program particularly, we accept people with all kinds of undergrads. So some people come in not knowing how to write at all, and we have to start at a sort of very base level. I think writing will always be important as long as we lead with storytelling. You can't tell a good story if you're not a good writer. And even with things like script writing for my broadcast students or my podcast students, you have to be a good writer to write a good narrative story in those formats. So I think it'll always be important. I think what we need to consider is different writing styles. So how you'd write in print is obviously different to how you'd write online. And I think something we've done very badly in this country in particular is newsrooms just copy pasting what was in print online. And that's why I think our digital migration has not worked out as well as we hoped. So yeah, no, writing definitely, and we should always be willing to do more on that front.
Yeah, just to chip in on the writing aspect. So I think from my experiences that those writing courses are some of the most fulfilling courses for a lecturer. Of course, people have different writing styles, but what we teach is the basics. And then we introduce them to different house styles and introduce them to our house style. So the process is so fulfilling because at the beginning, we ensure that they adopt a certain style or standard of writing. So when they submit, if say a semester has 13 or 14 weeks, most of the time the work they submit in the first week is pathetic. It's pathetic. If you're marking out of 10, you probably maybe mark them 0 out of whatever, 2 out of, and everything. By the time you move to the 7th week, you can even feel the progression, to say the improvement. They are kind of grasping some concepts of writing. By the time you are ending the semester, you actually start looking at some of the scripts and really, flipping back and forth, trying to find mistakes which you can't see, and that's when you feel so fulfilled that, what, these students have gone through the drill, and I think they've adopted, they've grasped some concepts and techniques of writing.
Yeah, I think for me, there's a tension, this kind of train that's coming down the tracks every week, 49 times a year, filling the newspaper, getting the work done, and then being doing it in a more thoughtful way, and to allow students the opportunity to experiment with their writing a little bit, to understand different genres of writing, and to really grow some wings in different areas. I think that, because we're on a treadmill, like in mainstream industry, a particular kind of style of writing tends to dominate and to emerge. And yes, it happens quite quickly, actually, that the progression happens, but then there's a plateau. And the problem of being understaffed and having the imperative of publishing is that you forget to do the teaching, that the teaching falls by the wayside. I mean, not forget exactly, but I think there is that danger. So that's a big, big tension. And frankly, it's not one that we've done particularly well at resolving.
So do you think writing even the publishing projects should be supported by actual writing courses alongside, sort of feature writing, because my colleague Enoch does that, or creative writing, which I do? Is that helpful, or is it just, spending too much time on one medium?
I think it would be very helpful, just because they don't write enough. So I've seen with my 2 classes that I've had now is they'll do just enough to get what they need for their portfolios and what counts for marks. So anything extra, so writing on their blogs or volunteering to write for someone, that's not happening as much as it used to. So I think if we do those 2 things alongside each other, they might also get that love for writing that maybe isn't necessarily possible in the 4 articles you need to produce.
Well, I think slightly different with our students. I mean, they have to produce a story a week. So that's 30 stories, in their portfolio. So that's quite a substantial amount. We do some workshops. So in the beginning, there'll be workshops, do a profile, or do a self-portrait, do a profile on someone else. It'll be scaffolded slowly through different genres. And we'll get writing teachers in to do certain kinds of workshops, 6-worders, for example, just trying to stretch different kinds of writing muscles. But it's never enough, and it's also about translating that into their story ideas, seeing the different possibilities in a story, and, just having a richer multimedia kind of approach to that storytelling as well. It's a default kind of, because you're under pressure, you have to produce a story. There's a default type of writing happening. And I think that's, that's worrying. And I think there's sometimes, as I say, too much pressure. and not enough space to breathe and think and, and reflect as well. I mean, you try and have weekly reflections on what we're doing, but there's such tumult that it's too much. And in fact, these students probably need to be given a break for a semester or a term at least to go and do other stuff, and other people come in and hold the thing for a bit, or something along those lines, because I think it does become relentless.
Should I? I think it's been addressed. Writing is important, especially for this generation, where we have so many platforms for writing, and it has to be adapted to many different platforms, and students have to be conscious of that. Otherwise, we write for WhatsApp, we write for different platforms. So we need to be very conscious and deliberate about what we're talking about when we're teaching how to write. There's writing for different platforms, and we need to have those conversations.
Writing is so many things, though. It's imagination, it's confidence, it's seeing the world in particular ways. It's so many things, actually. And so I think it's a really good question, because it does provoke, why is some of the writing so flat? Well, it's not that the writing is technically a problem. There's something wrong with the way of seeing, and the way of researching, and the way of interacting with sources and seeing its significance and connecting the dots with other things in the world, and all of those things. So it's a lot, actually. I think writing it is foundational, and it is something, I think, interestingly, that they do foundationally, and it's 24/7 sort of digital first writing as well, rather than the other way around. And we do a curation every week of that in a PDF sort of newspaper form, but it actually is writing for online. But that's not being explored either, in terms of, different forms of writing that can capture audience's attention, and the default. Thank you.
Thanks, Rod. I see a question here first, and then there, and then I'll come back here.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It's insightful, and I think for me, I'm happy that I'm getting to hear a lot about what you are doing. That's some of it, which I think some we're doing with our own campus radio station, but some of which we are still struggling with. My main question was around motivating the students. I know you were talking about assessments. We're doing that. For some students it works, for some not so much. And then trying to make them comfortable, providing meals, we are doing that as well. But sometimes also what Basil was saying about aligning the coursework to the work within the newsrooms is probably where we are at with our review. That's what we're trying to do, how to align the coursework to fit with what the students are doing. Because, for example, what Leslie was saying about feature writing, for us, it's offered in the print specialization, and yet the coursework, the students that volunteer most in the radio station are broadcasting majors. So you find that it's not aligned. And then also we have print specialization students who are there, they contribute to the radio station, but they feel a bit disgruntled because they would like to have a more tangible thing, like an online newspaper or a newspaper that they can sustain. So my question was mainly around that, the motivation. How do you keep them motivated to volunteer when you've tried assessments and you've tried other freebies, but it doesn't seem to be working? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm wondering if you guys have been confronted with the challenges of working with local languages versus English or any other foreign language like French. It so happens that the platforms that we do have, like the school newspaper, the online school newspaper at my university, at my school, and the radio station allows the students to communicate in the local language in Rwanda. And you will find that most people would want to do their practicals, in radio, because there they are comfortable. But when it comes to other platforms where they are supposed to publish, the online newspaper, for example, they are supposed to use English. And this is a country which is, underpinned with the challenges that have to deal with the English as an official language, and as long as Chinyarwanda, but where the students hardly are strong in either French or English, and yet the medium of teaching is English. So, and when it comes to writing, that is a big, big problem, even within the news media institutions themselves. The newspaper that the students are working on under my school is called Kaminu Zesta. It has a section for Chinyarwanda and a section for English. So the teachers, and among the teachers that teach writing courses, we find ourselves spending so much of our time editing, and we are not editing. The focus should be at least to edit the content, but when it comes to language, which is not even halfway, you find that aspect of editing distracts you from the content, that where you are supposed to pay more attention. So I don't know about your experience, if you have particularly students who come maybe from deep rural areas, on the part of South Africa, who are not deeply grounded in English, and yet they are supposed to write in English, and this is also the basis of their assessment. So I'd like maybe to get some insights on that as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think the multilingualism issue is critical, and one of the things we, as I said before, we picked up when trying to get into these community WhatsApp groups is that certain groups you would find that they were just voice messages, whereas in sort of more middle class areas there would be English text messages. In other places there would be isiXhosa voice messages, just about all of it. So that was fascinating to know. So when we started converting our news into bulletins for Rhodes Music Radio and for the current affairs shows, we kind of went, well, why don't we post these bulletins there? So you've got it almost like a little podcast that you, instead of putting the PDF there, we're now putting the radio version there. And we thought, there's this bot technology that, the Maverick uses. You can press and hear the story being read to you. But why not do it ourselves? So let's record our own stories, but let's not just record it in English. Let's now translate it into isiXhosa, and 5 of the 8 journalists are isiXhosa speakers. So that's sort of easier for them, although that's quite wobbly as well. So my colleague Linda Mkaza, is working closely with the students in those translations. But I think that opens up such a powerful, sort of set of possibilities for reaching audiences in audio. Posts on social media, on WhatsApp groups, on Messenger, but on the just in general, I think that principle. So the PDF, we occasionally have Afrikaans and isiXhosa, but not nearly enough. But I think this is driving it. The radio connection actually to what we do is now driving a multilingualism, which we're very keen to develop further. I think it's also just going back to what was said earlier by Hayes and others in the room about decolonization, and, just perhaps also, the way that we format our news. Perhaps we also need to think about tone and register and, the way that we do it, the way that we construct those audio stories, because at the moment they're formal bulletins, but we're kind of going, this is feeling very stultifying and very formal. The current affairs show is so much better because it's so much more loose, and we're also talking about deliberative radio. So how do we get communities to talk about their issues? Because we've got this Action for Accountability project, we've got recordings of people talking in their communities. How do we use that, or how do we simulate something like that in radio, which is more deliberative and really gets people to break it. The radio, the station manager will say, you've got an hour and you've got to have a song here, and then there's an advert, and it breaks the flow and the kind of energy of discourse as people would speak. in those other civic layers that, below the official layer, if you like.
I wanted to answer on motivation, but just to touch on what Rod said, I think we can decolonize in small ways. So we are English only in our paper and publication, but so our style guide, says that we have to italicize indigenous languages. I don't do that in my copy anymore. It's a fight I'm having with the writing mentor, but I just think it's ridiculous in 2022 in a country like this to be italicizing what are official languages. And even small things like not dubbing over people who speak on camera in an indigenous language. We just do the subtitles, or if it's in a podcast, we let them speak and then maybe sum up after. So I think small acts like that are also helpful, even when you're just producing in English alone. And then on motivation, I think sometimes we have to accept our role and its limitations. Beyond incentives and aligning with actual coursework, there's not much you can do. People want to have to do this and want to have to be here. And you can push and encourage and whatever else, but they need to meet you somewhere as well.
Basil?
On motivation, students are students. and they always be students. It's the marks. It's the marks, but there are a few that will always stand out and want to carry the project on. And I think understanding that from a class of maybe 30 students, there'll be 4 students that will really, carry this thing. That is the reality. Otherwise, most of them will just end at marks. So then you need to strategize, think clearly about how you get them in those marks. So because these projects and these courses are practical, then what you do is to focus on the continuous assessment and ensure that within the continuous assessment, there's space, enough space for them to keep practicing and earning the marks from there. So if it's a course, what we do, for example, we have different structures of continuous assessments. There are some theoretical courses which we do 50-50, 50% CA, 50% exam, or maybe 40% CA and 60% exam. But for those practical courses, it will be 60% continuous assessment and maybe only 40% for the exam. And within the continuous assessment, you need to be very clear that these 60 marks, 30 or half of the marks, or 60 marks will come from this aspect of practice. And when you demarcate the structure like that, it's very clear that then they will need to spend more time with you. And that's motivation enough. So what we do then is that in our department, we have a department where actually students live there. They stay there. They leave their rooms maybe at 8 for the first class, and they go back after the last class because in between classes, they will be moving to either the newspaper newsroom or the radio station newsroom, or they will maybe be doing something in the computer lab, but still working on something related to their productions. So yeah, of course they will go, for a cup of tea and whatever it is to their rooms, but they literally, live within the department. So and somehow we've actually discovered that that creates an environment for them to even be motivating each other and competing with each other. What we have now is a situation where, of the two, actually now we have a third platform we're calling the digital media hub, because there was a radio station and a newspaper. We're trying to integrate them through what we're now calling the digital media hub. To some extent, you can create some healthy competition between these platforms, to see which one is doing better, but it's the students that are driving this. So they want, those at the radio station want to look better than the guys at the newspaper. Those at the digital media hub would like to, look better than the others and the like. And and as I said in my introduction, I was motivated by my byline. And now what we see is that even as they produce this, on the hub, we produce like, video, like more or less like TV. And when they do programs there, it's video, they watch themselves, they share with their friends and whatever. To them it's real. Their families get to watch them cast the news. Their families and friends get to watch them, anchor programs and do analysis and the like, from economic programs, sports programs, and the like. So that is motivation enough, I think, for them.
Thanks, Basil. I see the last three hands. I'm going to see how we go with time, but the gentleman over here, the gentleman at the end, and then Alan, if we could go. You sure? So let's start on this side.
Thank you all. I just wanted to know, since you work with young people and also you're attached to the university, how much institutional support do you have, given that you're working with young people who can be bullied by all kinds of outside powerful big corporates, corrupt politicians, etc.? So how much support do you get in many forms from the universities that you are part of?
I'll just pause with that question and then we'll come back to the end. Go. It's a good question.
That's an interesting question. So I think the setup for us as a University of Zambia, media department and the radio station and the Lusaka Star has been that, we've always enjoyed some immunity. The university has mostly enjoyed a lot of immunity, which most media organizations do not. For example, we run very controversial programs sometimes, which even affect politicians and the like. But politicians would know that if they came to tamper with the radio station and even closed it, there will be a protest from the university. So that's the kind of protection that this station then will have. If anything, the struggle really is about how we are then established within the structures of the university, and in terms of who provides oversight beyond just the department, because within the department you would understand the mandate of what you're doing in terms of journalism and media and certain freedoms that you need to allow. The question is, would other people within the management structures, such as central management, vice chancellors and registrars, will they understand that you need to do certain things? You need to give these students certain freedoms to produce and all that. So sometimes maybe the strict kind of requirements would probably come from within to especially if you are in a public institution. The requirement would be that you operate as a public institution, even as a radio station, even as a newspaper organization. So if the radio station exists within the structures of the University of Zambia, which is a public institution, therefore somebody would expect that it operates like SABC or another institution which is which has that oversight from mostly the government.
I guess for us, we are support structure as lecturers within the department. Our biggest bully sometimes is often the university, so it doesn't come from that side. I think we try and teach our students that we happen to be at Wits, but we're not an advocate for the university out and out. We're an independent body. And I mean, we are always encouraged to that, if we're not getting calls from the VC's office or from the media liaison's office, we're not doing the right kind of storytelling. So we lead with that and support students when they run into those issues. I mean, even with the paper I handed out today, something came back about how it wasn't positive enough and blah, blah, blah. So I think we are the line, and they know that they can lean on us when those things arise.
So just quickly, I think, we're an off-campus news organization. So we're kind of looking towards not only our own boards, but to SANEF, for example, and support from outside. So when our student was intimidated by, well, yeah, I'm going to say it's the mayor of the town and the speaker of the council with imminent arrest for defamation, which has never happened in South Africa in the history of the country, I believe. We then went to the regional SANEF person. We sent letters to SANEF National. We're part of AIP. We got response from them. It's recorded. It's on record. We put a full transcript of exactly what happened so that we feel that we're protected. And what's been interesting actually is building a kind of, actually in the process of signing an MOU with Arena Holdings in the Eastern Cape, because the Dispatch and the Herald, we have some good relationships with them. We've had good relationships with them in the past. Our former editor is now the editor of Talk to the Town in Port Alfred. There's a kind of cluster of Arena Holdings that are talking about, student internships over vacations, talking about, if I go on sabbatical, yay, someone from Arena can maybe come in for 6 months and work with us, Also, we can set up sort of colloquia and talk about, issues that concern us, or like we were doing here today, talk about what are the normative, models for journalism in the Eastern Cape, and how are we doing, and, et cetera, et cetera. So I think those kinds of support structures are also potentially very useful.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the gentleman at the end for our second to last question. And I think there was a hand here somewhere. Leslie, was it you? No, you.
Yes, thank you. I think this discussion falls within the practice-based model of teaching that we spoke about earlier in the day, and I find it very, very useful. But I want to know, particularly from my colleague at the end, how you are able to manage student numbers. I don't know how many students you enroll per academic year. I'm saying so because at my university, Ghana Institute of Journalism, we sometimes admit in excess of 300 students first year journalism. So much as we want to do these things for them to have the hands-on, expose them to the practical aspect before they go out, it's usually very difficult. We used to have a newspaper, campus-based newspaper called The Communicator about 5-6 years ago, but then because of costs and other issues, it fizzled out, and so we've moved everything online. So my institution has developed, there is a new media course. So they tried to migrate everything over there, hoping that students will have their own blogs and be able to write over there. During our long vac, between second semester and then first semester of the next academic year, we send students on internship to go and then work with newsrooms to see what happens. But these have all produced some challenges. For example, the new media course, you have and challenges with lecturers. You have, for example, 2 lecturers teaching this particular course, sharing over 300 students, so 150. How much time would they have for supervision to really monitor? And I like the way you sometimes have to stay with them in the newsroom and all this. How, maybe I need advice as to how we can handle these things. Now, those who go on internship or attachment, the story they come back with is that sometimes they go there and they become the errand boys and girls at the studio, at the newsrooms. Go and buy me food, go and do this. So within the period, they are unable to really get what they have to get. So at the end, I think we are failing to give them that kind of practical experience that they should have from campus before they move out there. So maybe with your experience, I don't know what you feel about this. Particularly, I want to know how many students you have and how you are able to manage your time with them and go through, for example, providing about 3-4 writing exercises and follow the progress. My place, the lecturers can do with only one. So the point is, at what point do you give them this exercise? At the beginning point or middle point or at the end point of the semester? And so, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Okay, thank you for the question. It's a very, very important question. It's actually real. It's a real problem that I guess most of the universities are facing. So the idea was that we are going, I mean, I was in a class of only 11 students.
Wow.
When I was doing the program. At some point, the numbers rose to 120, and then now they're down to around 40, 50, somewhere around there. So there's a phase when the university stopped receiving so much support from the government, and there's been emphasis about now getting more numbers for commercial purposes, of course. So we were being all the time, required, pushed to get more and more. So that problem is always there. But our recommendation was that we would only have a maximum of 30. Initially, then it went to 40, stayed there for some time, but again, we are pushed. So whenever you're asked how many students you like to have, you give them 40, you get 80. So it's a real problem. But so the way we try to deal with it also is to have, first of all, we have technicians also at the radio station who try to supervise our students in terms of technical handling of stuff and other things. We also have a manager. We also get tutors who try to help us manage these students. So because of the numbers of those kind of stuff around, the responsibilities is kind of spread across, but it's a real problem, really. And now you find that even as they go for attachments, they still go for attachments. If the number is too big, then industry can't absorb them. So then, as you said, they end up being receptionists, errand people and all that, and they'll be sent for. So we do supervisions where we follow these students when they're on attachments. We go to the organizations to kind of assess how they're working, and you find that your student is just by the reception. And when you find, as you are, engaging the supervisor, what the feedback they're giving you is that, no, look, he or she has been answering calls, she's very good with people, but that's not we want. So it's a real problem, actually.
I just wanted to ask a question, because a lot of the learning, like pre-COVID, used to happen in the student press. I was just wondering if the student press is still alive.
And I think that that's a question we can all ponder over lunch while we're sitting next to each other with a plate of food. I think lunch is ready, Franz? No?
Almost, but we just couldn't do the quick and question.
Oh, okay. Is that why we're wrapping up so quickly? Apologies.
Sorry,
Can I just say thank you to our speakers and yeah, thank you for your engagement, Franz.
Sure. So thanks very much. I mean, as again, we ran out of time before we ran out of things to say. Lunch is just about ready, but before we go down, if I've asked a couple, as I said earlier, I asked a couple of people just to give a very quick introduction to projects that they're involved in. Terje, I see you there together with Elva. Are you able to talk about Afromedia Network just for a minute or two?
Absolutely, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear. Welcome.
Fantastic. So yeah, shall we just go straight to it?
Please do. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm hearing that you're waiting for lunch, so we shouldn't stand in the way for too long. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to say something about Afromedia Network. And I can see you all clearly. I can hear you. It's really great. I should have been there. But this Afromedia Network is a website. It is a informal network between African media research communities. So our slogan is simply connecting the African media research community. And the idea behind this is that, well, basically we felt there is a lack of connectivity between the different regions on the African continent. And also maybe, especially as an outsider to Africa, well, I go there a lot, but there is really no place where you can go and get an overview of all the educational institutions, the programs, the media research environments on the continent. And that is what we are trying to kind of solve with this site. So I'll let my colleague Elva show you the site. If she can speak, but I'll just say that on this site, the website is simply afromedia.network. You can create your own profile. You can list your latest publications, which institutions you're from, and it will one I think very useful feature is simply that it will give an overview of all the journalism and media and communication programs that we know about on the African continent, because there is no such place as of yet, but this is going to solve that need. So we are still kind of testing out some features on the site, but it is possible to go and register. We did have the official launch of the site in Burundi 2 weeks ago. And we do hope that all of you feel that this is something that you would like to register on. It's very easy and something you find useful. Before I give the word to Elva, perhaps just briefly let me mention the institutions behind. So it's 2 institutions in East Africa. It's Uganda Christian University and University of Rwanda, which are represented there with you. It's the University of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, and then it's my own institution, NLA University College in Norway. So that's just briefly. I guess I've spent the time we were given, Franz, but if I can just call upon Elva to say hello as well, because she's the one who's been working on this for almost a year now, and she is administering the site. Elva, are you there?
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks, Elva. We can hear you clearly. Thanks, Elva.
Yes, thank you so much for this opportunity to present the Afromedia Network. But as Tarja said, this is an opportunity for researchers on the African continent. There could be, but as long as they're reporting, doing research.
We just lost you there.
Africa, they will always be welcome.
Elva.
We
lost Elva there.
Yes, as you see, the platform is meant for the researchers. So it will truly depend on each and every researcher to register their profile, and the website will only be efficient to the extent that the research community will support it. So I kindly request you to please log in, create your profile. And we are very happy to get feedback on the site. And since it's in the beginning, we really need your insights, and we make the site useful. And the site is made in such a way that it's manageable, that a researcher can sign up, get the information, stay there. The information that can be shared can stay there for quite some years. So I call upon you to please be able to sign in your profiles, share the information, because one of the challenges that the African media researchers face is being able to cite each other, to quote each other, to support each other, and to know what they're doing. So this is a very interesting platform which I got the opportunity to work on, and I really feel privileged to be able to present it at this conference. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks very much. So that's the web address which you can go to and have a look at. I see people are already looking. Thanks. Jessica, will you say something about the conference being planned?
Hi again, Jessica here from the Namibia Media Trust. Just before I dive into the conference, it's an annual conference on the future of journalism education in Southern Africa, in collaboration with MISA Malawi and DW Academy. Now, people think the Namibia Media Trust is a media house. We are actually a human rights civil society organization that advocates for access to information, press freedom, freedom of expression, and journalism education. So we established an NXT journalism hub, which we call the bridge between the newsroom and the classroom. So this is the go-to place for meeting trends, meeting in evolving trends in journalism. We have co-creation modules that focuses on how to approach new journalistic skills. Now, the NXT Hub did a course on how to report on voting during elections, because we saw that there was a need for journalists to be educated on how to report on elections. In 2018, we also saw that media houses are struggling to sustain themselves. So we did another launch on media sustainability, but then as years went on, we saw that we can't keep having a launch on each topic that the journalists struggle with in Namibia. So we decided to come up with modules, modules that focuses on basics of journalism, basics of investigative journalism, social media verification, because we see that journalists don't take accountability when they are called out on social media. They post, and then when people call them out, they are not accountable of what the content they put out. Public relations and general communication skills as well, because there's a lack of content in our newsrooms. Journalists are lazy. They take a press statement from a company and post it exactly as it is in print media on social media. So those are the skills that we basically help with within our newsrooms. Now, the NMT is known as the watchdogs and sort of gatekeepers of media houses in Namibia. So yearly we go through, we do research on what media houses need and lack, and what our audiences, citizens as Namibians expect from this journalist. So this collaboration of the future of journalism education comes with themes such as media viability, innovation, media sustainability, so on and so forth. So what we do is we come up with topics throughout the year. December to December, we sort of do research on which topics do we need to focus on. Is it restoring trust in the media? Is it using TikTok for journalism? Is it using Twitter spaces for journalism? How do we meet the demands of our audiences? So during the year, we do that research, and then we sort of come up with topics, and we contact media practitioners in Southern Africa that can speak on these topics. So the annual conference is basically an education type of bringing your journalists on board with what's happening within the space. So yeah, that is the future of journalism education.
Thanks very much. I've been watching that conference over the last couple of years develop, and it's good to see that it's firmly on the landscape. Finally, Alan Finley will talk about two projects that he's involved in.
Thanks, Frans. Just briefly, so the first one is, some people might have remembered UNESCO's Center of Excellence in Journalism Education project from about 2007, where they had various criteria they developed about what counts as a excellence in journalism education around Africa. And then they assessed various centers and came up with a list and then provided some grant funding for them to develop capacity in various areas. Rhodes University School of Journalism, together with the Wits Center for Journalism, is doing an updated version, which should start, we hope, next month and run for about 15 months. The slight difference that we've tried to introduce to this, though, is we're working with what they've done, but we want to provide some nuance to the idea of excellence. We want to provide excellence in what context in particular. So it does segue quite nicely with some of these discussions we've been having around nuance and of context in particular. So in a sense, there's a little bit of a research element to it to see if we can come up with criteria that is flexible and that speaks to specific contexts rather than general ones. So for instance, practically, if someone has a really brilliant course on conflict reporting in a conflict area, that would be excellence. But I mean, it might not be relevant, say, in Botswana, for example. So we want to be able to respond to these different, more localized senses of excellence. There are various processes, one including setting up a reference group, and I hope that people here can participate in that reference group. And that's about serving as a sort of springboard to some of the documents and ideas that we come up with. So I might be approaching people here, which I think is the most reasonable group to do that, to help us with that. And then there are 5 online regional meetings after we've developed draft criteria to try help us refine and adapt this criteria to specific contexts. And then there's a process of organizations filling out the criteria, in other words, because we're collecting data that way, and then those that have applying for funds to do some short intervention to build the capacity in their institution. And that will be, Wits will be managing those funds, and there'll be a process of selection, and then they will get those funds. So I think it's a process to participate in and stay involved in, because there are sort of very direct benefits for institutions in the region. And France, yeah. Okay, so State of the Newsroom is, you might know that each year Wits Center for Journalism produces a State of the Newsroom publication, which is an analysis of the media environment, kind of from a multi-stakeholder perspective for each country, for the country, with various different content components, research-based discussions and so on, commentaries and discussions on indicators and so on. So Wits has been doing it for South Africa for many years now. In 2020, we did one for Malawi, the first one for Malawi in partnership with the Center for Journalism Education there. And they're redoing one through their own funding, a second one. So we're quite excited about that. They're doing that now. And the first one we've managed through funding through CEDA and Civicus that the Wits Center has money from. We are working with Educom in Senegal, who's producing the first State of the Newsroom for Senegal. So, and it'll be in French. So we kind of, the first issue will be in French, and then we're going to translate it. But we're also quite happy about bridging the sort of language divide and working in West Africa, but also about this idea of State of the Newsroom kind of spreading out into other countries in Africa, which is, it's France's kind of baby, so to speak. So I think he's well, you might want to say more, but that's State of the Newsroom. Yeah.
Thanks very much. We were going to have something about a guidebook on policy, but Sandra, I think, isn't here. Oh, okay. You've just arrived. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Yeah.
So I excited as I am. Do you want to get next to the microphone so that people are live? Okay, thanks. Would it be okay down here? Okay, so I don't know how many of you are aware of this project. It's Jeanette Minnie. I don't know if I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with her. After she passed away, a group of people called I since called them the Friends of Jeanette Money, got together to create a course on media policy. We've done it for several years. It's online, it's on Coursera. No, it's on edX. It is an amazing course, and every year we've been able to improve it slightly. And then with the support of UNESCO and the Namibian Media Trust, we've now put it into an educator's guide. I think Guy referred to in emails to you, Francis, me as the author. No, this is really a collaborative project. Justine Law has been working on it, Guy Berger, Zoe Titus, all the media policy people. And the great thing about this is I find, and I'm sure you find too with your journalism students, is they don't understand kind of the systems around media. And this is great because it's got everything. There is a chapter on freedom of expression, building blocks, media pluralism and diversity, content regulation and democracy. We, for this book, but it's not in the course yet, FAIR's Media Africa put a course together on access to information, and there's a chapter about that in there based on their a lot of their content. And then there's civil society and policy making. I'd love to show you all the pretty pictures, because I think one of the things that this book has really done is made things simple. But this is so hot off the press that I'm not even supposed to be opening it. So I have copies for everyone. I brought 3 copies for people who feel they could hand them out to their colleagues. And each of them has a sign on, do not open till Wednesday. So please don't get as excited as I am and tear it open and destroy the glue, because it's still setting.
Okay. Thanks very much. Yeah. Thanks to all of the colleagues, just an indication of how much of interest people are busy with, right? And how much, how much is going on out there. I think it's lunchtime. We'll go down to the club for lunch. They're ready for us. And then we will resume at 2 o'clock. I hope those online will join us again then. I'm sorry we can't email you a plate of food, but there we go. So have a good lunch. See you after lunch.